Hello everyone and welcome to Janet's Craft Corner. Today we're going to be making the America Fireworks farmhouse sign, and this is a pretty easy one, but it does have some distressing, and it also comes with a stencil, and that stencil is included with your kit when you buy it. So we're going to start by painting the background of our piece. I'm going to use kind of like a sky blue, a really light sky mist blue. It's actually Folk Art Sky Mist. To give myself a background. And as we always do with our painting, we're going to paint from the center of the piece out towards the outer edges so that we don't have to worry so much about cleaning our edges. We'll still may have a little bit of cleaning to do, but we won't have near the cleaning we would have to do if we worked our way from the outside on. So you need to make sure you go from the middle out rather than from the outside on to any piece of wood that you're painting. And when you can't do that, then you're probably going to have a lot of trimming work done. And I don't know about you, but I'd prefer to just get it painted and put it up. And you know, these are homemade items, so they don't have to be perfect on the edges, but you do want to minimize the amount of I guess splatter you have on your edges. That's just the best term for that. I'm using a really, really light blue on this one. The one I did earlier, I did a little darker blue. I'm not sure which one I like better. I'll see when I get all done whether I like this one or the other one better. But you can use any blue you want, or you can use, pretty much any other color you want. I wouldn't be bad necessarily with a white or an ivory white background, as long as you changed the word America to be a different color. And I may have to, with this really, really light blue, change it even with this one. I'm not sure yet. I have to think about that as we go here, because this is really, really light. I am pulling quite a bit over from my palette over to my board each time. I don't know why I didn't just squirt it directly on my board, but I didn't. So I usually, when I'm doing a piece this large, will just squirt it directly on the board because you get better coverage that way. So you can see as I go, I am going back over areas that I've already painted to get an extra, not really a full extra coat, but a little bit extra paint on them. I try not to have to do full extra coats if I can avoid it, just because remembering to kind of keep my brush out and keep it from getting too dry, because I got to do it within a certain amount of time or the brush will get dry, and all those little things. I just like to get it all done in one shot, but it's not always possible. Sometimes you really have to wait and go back. Like I said, by putting it directly on there, I don't have to waste as much on the palette. For something this large, that'll work well. It won't work well on some of these other colors, but it works well on this. I wouldn't do anything much smaller than this using that method. It gives you a much thicker coat when you put it on usually, because you don't tend to spread it as thin as when you're pulling it to the board from your palette. But not always. That's not always the case. It's just usually the case. I love these farmhouse signs because they are technically interchangeable. I have a breadboard that I have done that I've got. It's kind of a distressed white breadboard, and I have made it interchangeable by I've given it an interchangeable bow rather than putting a neutral bow on it that I can use all the time. I've given mine an interchangeable bow, and if you go to that YouTube video on the farmhouse breadboard, you will see how I did that by, instead of attaching the bow directly to the breadboard, I put Velcro on the breadboard and Velcro on the back of the bow, so that it is easily changed out to match the individual signs that I have. I think that's going to dry okay. We're going to leave it and let it go and see how we do. Okay. And then, okay, these down here on the bottom, this one and these two are the red. And so we're going to get our red. I am using Folk Art's Apple Red for this. Pretty much any red would work. I kind of wish I'd have grabbed a darker red, but this is the one I grabbed, so it's kind of a primary color red. But and I am going to try to keep my the wick clean. I'm going to try to put it do it with the creamy white, the ivory white, because I got to be careful up there. Other than that, I'm again going to work from my inside to my outside. And then two of the stripes on, that's the larger of the three fireworks. Two of the stripes on the mid-sized firework are also done in the red. And these are a little thinner, so it's harder to do the, make sure you come from the outside edge on. So I'm just very careful as I come along that outer edge to make sure I'm not bringing my brush back on. I'm still kind of, even though I'm running it down that edge, I'm keeping it going off at all times. This is this is one of those farmhouse signs that just comes together pretty quick and easy, but yet it has some pretty neat things on it that make it nice. And I don't think I'm going to want my America to be white. I don't think that's going to show up well on this really, really light blue. So I'm actually going to do it in this red also, and kind of because I know what color, where my colors are on this. As you're looking at a picture, you'll know where yours are. But I'm going to do it, and I am going to use the sponge method. This little piece that I'm using, and I'll show you after I'm done with this sponge what it really looks like, is a gripper. I got it as part of a nail kit, a nail decorating kit, I think it was. But it really, it makes life nice, especially like for me. I get a little bit of an issue with my fibromyalgia when I'm using the bouncing of the sponge method. The sponge method is great for small letters like this, or mid-sized letters like this, or smaller. It is also great when you're worried about your edges. It helps you keep your edges really equal so that you don't have to trim out. Like that. But it's very important when you're using the sponge method that you're keeping what's on your sponge very light. You're offloading your sponge on your palette as you go before you bring it over here, and you're keeping your touch light, so you're not pushing down very hard on your wood, so that you're not going down on those edges where you don't want the color to go. I think that'll be better than the white on this really, really super light blue. It's just a little lighter than I intended, but it'll work. So we're going to keep going with it. Okay, and this little tool, the way it looks, let me show you, is it's just, like I said, it's a gripper. See, it goes, my husband says you can buy them at a hardware store. I'd never seen them there, never really looked from there, but that's what it looks like. Okay. And I've just got little bitty sponges up here. They're not, I've cut them up from a sponge, and they're little bitty squares. They're not very big at all that I use for that. Okay, so these two are dark blue. So let's get us some dark blue. On this one, it's important that the red get dry before you do the white. And so that's why for me, it was very important that I do them in the right order. I'm using navy blue by Fulgart for that, And so I'm just gonna get me a brush over here. And again, I'm going to, it's also going to be important that this one navy blue piece, this is a little thick. Okay, this is the navy blue piece that it's going to need to be done first so that it gets good and dry also. Because this comes with a stencil, and I'm going to use that stencil on two pieces, on two of the fireworks. I'm going to use it on this one and the big red one. The one that's got the stripes on it, I am not going to use it, although you could if you wanted to. But I'm going to use it in the ivory color, and with the stripes, there's ivory down the middle of that. So I don't think that would show up well with that piece, on that piece. And then on this one, the stripes are below it. It looks like it's the smallest of the three, but it really isn't because it has the stripes below it. Stripes are below it on here, and then it becomes the top of that one. And it's going to get the large star we have over there to the side. It's going to be layered on top of it. And then I'm actually going to use, I've debated what I was going to use. I don't really want to get my brown out. So I'm going to use my blue to just touch over here and get this button that's actually going to go on top of my star for decoration. I think the blue will be fine. And I'm going to get me a piece of wet wipe here. And kind of dab at that to remove some of it so that it's not quite as dark. It's more of a stain effect than a solid effect. So there we go. We could have applied it with our wet wipe, but I applied it with my brush and then pulled a little bit of it off with my wet wipe. Okay, so that's our blue. Let's see if I think I need anything else anywhere else. Don't think so. Okay, so then we're going to do our little star here is gold. I'm using Moon Yellow, again by Folk Art. I prefer the Folk Art paints. Deco Art Americana has some more unique colors than the Folk Art does, but I've learned they're usually thinner, and so they take extra coats. And I'm not a patient crafter. I like to craft quickly, and so I get frustrated. Now, I'm actually going to use the sponge method on this, even though, well, maybe I'm not. I'm going to try it with a brush first and see how it does. Yellow is one of those colors that you just really need multiple coats on. And I have not yet found a way to avoid doing multiple coats of yellow. But the thing with yellow is you got to be very careful when you're doing multiple coats that you don't end up doing a coat before the yellow gets dry, because it is also notorious for pulling paint off rather than putting more paint on. Don't ask me why. I don't have an answer to that question. It's one of those kind of things that it really bugs me, but I don't have an answer. So I'm going to keep going a little bit here until I see that start to happen. Maybe I'll get lucky and I won't have to do a full second coat. But if I start to see it pulling off, thinning out my yellow, then I'm going to very quickly quit and we'll come back to it. And I'm starting to see that right there. Okay, so we'll come back to that here in a minute. Lay our brush here because we're going to use it again. And then this here is our white. Hopefully these two are dry. They're getting there. Is our Ivory White, and we're going to use it for that middle stripe on the mid-size piece. So I'm going to do, first of all, the stripe. This piece is the stripe. And then I'm going to do the tops of each of these for the cords that are on them. The, what do you call it? Fuses. That's what those are called. The fuses that are on each of the firecrackers. So I got an awfully small brush, but I think we can make it work. I was thinking more about the fuses than about this piece when I grabbed it. But we're going to make it work here. And then we're going to use this same color to do our stars. And we're going to do stars, like I said, on our large red piece and on our smallest blue piece, which is actually not the smallest of the two blue pieces, but it is the smallest firework when we're done, because this one gets the stripes added underneath it that makes it part of a full firework, and so it becomes taller than this one. So it's kind of a misnomer when I say the smallest firework. It is the smallest one, but it is not the smallest blue piece. So kind of think about that a little bit when you're doing them, so you don't mess yourself up. Although I don't think it would be a bad idea to have extras. Okay, so then I'm going to get these fuses here, and I'm going to be very careful in what I'm painting here because I don't want to have to touch this up a lot, but I also don't want to get down on the firework itself. So one of the tricks I found when you're doing painting is to always turn your palette around, turn your paintboard, your tape board around to the best place for you to have the best angle on the piece that you're trying to paint. You can easily do that. See, I kind of came off my edge there. But you can easily do that by turning your paintboard, so that it's easier to keep your hand moving in the way that makes the most sense, rather than trying to turn my hand in a funny manner to get it to go up and down on these. I just turn my board. Okay, and then I'm going to put another coat on this white here. And this is not like the yellow. I don't tend to have a problem with it picking itself up. I did give it a few seconds to dry between them, but it doesn't tend to do that as much. So I'm going to give it a second coat just to cover that over. And it looks like I'm going to have to do that on my I sworn that because I'm about ready to make a mess. On my fuses also, because they're coming in a little pale. They can be a little pale because they're really kind of more of a tannish color, but I don't want them to be too pale. I don't want them to look like they're not painted. Okay, takes care of that white. And then last, I'm going to do the star again real quick to give it another coat. It's had time to dry, and that will give me that. I want the bright color, and so to get that bright color with that star, with any kind of yellow, you got to do multiple coats. Okay, now then, we're gonna go to our stencil. Where'd my stencil go? There it is. So I have a star stencil here, and I'm gonna lay it on my piece, and in this case, it doesn't quite cover my whole piece, so I'm gonna have to do it in 2 pieces. That's okay though. And I'm just gonna use, again, I am using a sponge method. You can use a dauber, but I found the sponge works just as well, and so I use the sponge method. I've got them off a little bit off center, so I want that on purpose so that so it doesn't look like it was perfect. So I am doing those outside edge ones kind of first, because they'll be the hardest ones to do. And I'm just making sure I go straight up and down. I don't want to, see, I'm having a little trouble with that bouncing. If I don't go straight up and down, I will end up with it bleeding. And that's not what I want. I want a good, strong, solid star. So I've got to make sure I go straight up and down on it. Good way to do this is to tape it before you start, but I didn't, so we're going to just go with it. Like putting one finger up towards the top there, I'm managing to keep it down, one towards the bottom. I keep it attached down pretty tight, that I wasn't doing when I had just one finger on it. And because we're going to distress this, we do want to make sure we get these stars pretty good and solid. So I probably will go back over all of it one more time before I move the stars down to get the last row or two. I cut my stencil a little wrong. I'll try to fix that for you guys if you order this kit. Hopefully I will have it fixed by the time you order it. Once you've done a little bit of this stencil, you'll notice it's not bouncing near as much as it was. And I'm going to go back through and put another coat on all these stars before I move it, because I want, like I said, I really want a good solid star, because I'm going to distress it, so that's going to take some of that solid star off of there. And if you feel like you want to keep your stars really solid, but you want to distress, you could distress it before you put the stars on it. There's no reason why you can't do it that way too. These stencils are reusable. I will tell you though, they're hard to clean because they're kind of thin. So what I recommend is that you let them dry before you try to reuse them. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take all the way down to here to get, so I can get the one that lines up right. I'm going to put it on, light it up again. I'm going to hold it down. And I'm going to do the last little piece down here, the last little row. And this again is where I should have taped it, but I didn't, so. Okay, and then I'm going to pick it all up. And I'm going to do this again on this one. It's the smallest of the two, but it looks like the middle-sized one. And again, I want my edges to not be, I got a piece of hair caught there. Let me see if I can get that off. So I want my edges to not be totally uniform. So I'm going to do like this, and like this. And you gotta be careful where you're putting your fingers, especially after the first one, because needless to say, you probably have paint on your fingers. So you gotta make sure you don't put your finger where you don't want paint to appear. And there you saw it kind of bounce, so I'm going to try to get it as lined up as best I can again. But then I'm also going to not in any way touch those stars on that top level. Because I know that it bounced a little bit and I don't want to risk my stars being slightly different. Oh, I have made a mess down here at the bottom. So what I'm going to do, I actually made a huge mess on this one. So we're going to just clean it off. And it's not going to clean well, and that's okay, because what we're going to do is we're going to clean it off as best we can while it's still somewhat wet. And then I'm going to repaint with the navy, and then I'm going to tape it this next time. So I'll put a new coat of the navy on. I wish I could let that dry a little more. We'll see. My paper towel has gotten away from me here. So I'm going to kind of pat that off with my hand, just because I don't want that extra water on there. And then I'm going to paint it. Since I do want to distress this, this will be okay, definitely without doing even 2 coats. I could do 2 coats to get it to really cover, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to give it 1 coat because I'm going to end up distressing it anyway. But I kind of had made a messy mess of that. So that is the last piece that goes on this piece. So I'm actually going to go to assembling a little bit. And then come back to do the white on this to give that glue a chance to dry. So this is kind of backwards. I would normally have done this and finished this piece out, but that is not actually going to work this time because I made that error. It's got to be really careful. That's why I said make sure you're taping it down if that's the case. Okay, so we're going to put so when we distress, the best way I've found to distress is to use a sandpaper. I'm going to start by distressing my background. And so I have a little sandpaper tool here I got on Amazon. But I'm going to try and use it to go. Now, you can distress by going any direction you want. I tend to think I like going in one direction. So I'm going to go back and forth this way. And you're just going to rough it up a little bit. That's all you're doing. And how much or how little you want to rough it is up to you. With this lighter color, it's not going to show up as much. So I might tend to rough it a little more than I would with a darker color. Although I kind of not. But I'm going back and forth across this direction, keeping it always going this direction, not ever going this direction. My exception to that rule is that I do go along my edges, because that's where I want the most to be, most roughing to happen. So like that. Okay. Then I'm going to use a microfiber cloth to wipe that down good. And then before I start on my next distressing part, I'm going to actually glue things on so I can distress straight across without much trouble. It'll be easier to do it as one big piece than as all the little individual pieces. So I'm going to glue these guys on. And like I said, if you're going to trim, now's the time to do it. I am going to do a little bit right there at the top. I use a marker when I'm trimming. Some people use a brush. It's easy to use either. Just remember that when you're trimming, you want to come from the back towards the front, because that way if you slip, you don't end up putting something on the, putting a big mark on the front of your piece. And then these two, I don't need to do, well, I'm going to do this side of this one. Really don't need to do, I'm going to do one side of one. And actually I'm going to do this side of this one, because it's pretty good. And then this one I'm not going to worry about because it's going to be on the inside. This one I'm not going to worry about because it's going to be on the inside. This one is dark blue, so it's not going to need any trim. And then America, because I did it with the sponge method, what little edge it has is uniform, so I don't have to worry about that. So that's all the trimming I need to do. You can look at yours and see what you need to do on yours. Okay, so I'm just gonna, I am using, let me show you what I'm using. I'm using Art Glitter Designer Dries Clear Adhesive. I always have trouble doing this. It's available on Amazon, and I love this glue because it dries quickly, but not so quickly that I can't move it if I need to. So that makes, hopefully that made sense. But so I'm going to put my glue in here. It also dries clear, so it doesn't matter if I get a little bit off of my edges. It's not a big deal because it's going to dry clear, and it doesn't take much. I mean, you can see there how little I've got on that piece. Then I'm going to line him up with my marks on my piece. And then, like I said, that's the one I trimmed, right? Yes, that's the one I trimmed. So we're going to start with this one. Putting it on the inside. And the white. And I popped just a little bit going this way. See, that's why I said you get a little bit of wiggle room. And that's one of the things I like about it, because I like that I don't have to get it perfect the very first time. I have a little bit of time to wiggle it a little to get everything to line up and to cover my lines on my board, the engraved lines that are there for you to help you assemble a piece. There's those three pieces, and then this one goes up there. And then last but not least on this level is, on this layer, is our America. I'm a little more generous on my letters than some people. They really just need a few dots here and there, but I hate it when my letters come off. We did not put the America up at the top of this to tell you where to put it, because some people want this for if they're in Canada or in another country where they like the fireworks, but they don't want to put the America on it. And we didn't want to make it hard for them to not put the America on it. I have some foreign customers that have run into that problem with our patriotic stuff. They like the red, white, and blue, but they don't like that they're stuck with America or USA or something like that. So that's why we did this one this way. But you can see it's not hard to place, and I think I probably did it that way just a little further than I should have, because it doesn't look like I'm quite centered. But it doesn't have to be perfect either. I think these are not quite centered, just for the record, because there's much more space over here than there is here. So there we go on those. Okay. Make sure that those are all attached well, and then we're going to do our same thing. We're going to go back and forth this way to do our distressing. And you can distress it however much or little you want to. You wouldn't have to distress it at all. You saw what it looked like before I started on this process. You wouldn't have to distress it at all if you didn't want to. So I'm going to dust that off a little. And try to dust off that part there too. It's kind of a little hard there, but you want to know a trick? I have an air dryer. And this is used to dry when things are still wet, but it'll do this because it blows a little bit of air. Not blowing very much today. So we'll probably have to touch that off with a little bit of a blower. That's okay, we can do that. Let's see if I can get this to go there. Yeah, that works. Okay, and then our last piece, we got to go back and do our stars again. And I'm just going to pull this off of here to use it, to do it. And I'm actually going to just take this and I'm going to go probably up to here. And I'm going to tape my edges. And on this piece, it's a little harder than on some pieces, but I'm just using standard Scotch tape. I just want enough to hold it. I don't need much. So I'm doing this top edge. I'm just putting it right along that top, just outside the stars, catching it on that edge there. And then the bottom edge, I'm actually going to have to kind of roll over to do it. You want to make sure you roll it. I'm not going to roll it. Okay, it's not rolling well. So, but this way it's held in place up there. So let's try doing this again and see if we get a little bit better result this time. So I can just hold down here now. It's held in place up there. I just was doing a lousy job of holding it that time. Did a really good job on the red, but on the blue I could not hold it in place for some reason. It's just kind of one of those things. But there, because I taped it down up there, it's coming out much better. And I can easily go back and do my extra dots pressures on it to get it to fill in a little better. I'm not one that likes distressing. I like my stuff kind of, I don't know what the word for it is, but I like mine without the distressing on it. So that's why you'll notice I didn't do a lot of distressing on mine. But you can distress it as much as you want or as little as you want. It's totally up to you. Or you can choose not to distress it at all. That's always an option. And I'm going to put my hand up here. I'm going to go right about there. Keep it in the middle. Down here I am getting a little bounce with the stencil, but because the stencil is not actually moving, it's just bouncing up and down, I'm still getting clean stars. Go back down here, put my finger back down here to hold this bottom. I shouldn't get too much bouncing now. And I'm going to go back up here and go over all of it again. It's because I want my stars to be a little darker because I am going to distress them and that's going to lighten them up some. And we'll maybe want to do one of these soon without distressing any of it. I think it might be just as cute. And then I'm going to pick up from the bottom because I'm attached at the top, remember, and pull off. And I've got a little bit of a spot there where I didn't let it dry quite enough, so I'm going to get a little bit of blue and see if I can't touch that up without having to redo the whole thing. And you know, it's just because where I had some little bit of white on that underneath it where I bounced it too much before. And so I just touched it up a little. You know, you obviously don't want to have to do that around every single star, but it wasn't too bad around that one. Okay. And for today, I'm probably going to leave this one alone and not distress it just because I got to let it dry some. But I am going to go ahead and glue it on for you. Obviously, if you feel like you don't have enough distressing here, make sure you do that before you glue this piece on. I'm happy with mine. I don't, like I said, I'm not one that likes the distressing really well, so this guy goes just kind of in the middle here. And then where'd our star go? Our star goes up here on our glue. And then we've got our little button here too. And I think before I finish this off, I'm going to finish this video, but I think before I put it out, I'm probably going to add a little bit of a raffia bow. I'm thinking maybe right there. I don't know, maybe, maybe not. I'll have to see what I feel like later. But there is the results of our America farmhouse sign, and see how quick and easy that was to come together, and easily, 45 minutes, and you've got a nice little, it's kind of distressed, it's kind of not, it works either way, and you've got a nice little America thing to hang up on your wall, or to put it in a display on a shelf, or I'm going to put mine obviously on my breadboard. But I hope you enjoyed, and you'll come back again soon to see what else we're making. Thanks for joining us.